Hi guys, it's James from Divine Crochet. Welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to share the pattern that I like to use to make all of my crochet beanies and fisherman hats. This pattern, I've never had a problem with any bumps or anything at the top of the beanie, which I have with a lot of other patterns. I've used this pattern quite a lot just because I personally get a lot of wear out of beanies, and I've also made a few for my family and friends. As long as you know how to do a chain stitch as well as a single half double and double crochet, you're going to be more than fine with this pattern. As for materials, you can use whatever yarn and hook size you would like. I personally used double knit cotton yarn and a 3mm hook just because I wanted my hat to be quite tight and thick. However, if you wanted a more stretchy hat, you might want to use a slightly bigger hook size and acrylic yarn. You'll also want a hat that already fits you really well, or a measuring tape to make sure that the hat that you're making is going to fit you in the way that you would like. I filmed a tutorial similar to this earlier this year, but I wanted to refilm it just to make my instructions a little bit clearer, but I'm going to leave that video linked down below if you want to go and check it out. Before we get into the video, make sure you're subscribed and like and comment on this video if you found it helpful. Once you've gathered all the materials that you need, we're ready to start the pattern. Our first step in creating our beanie is going to be to create a slip knot, and then we're going to start by chaining the total height of the hat. So this is going to be where your tape measure or your hat that already fits you well is going to come in handy. So you either want to chain from the crown of your head to where you want the bottom of your beanie to hit. And bear in mind, obviously with a lot of beanies you're going to have the bottom bit folded up, so please account for that. But in my opinion, the better way to do this is to have a beanie that fits you well, or a fisherman hat that fits you well, and then chain from the top of the hat to the bottom of the hat while it's folded down. Once you're happy with that length, we're going to add 2 chains extra, and this is going to be what we use for our turning chain on one of our sides of our beanie. And then we need to skip 3 chain stitches in total and work a double crochet into the 4th chain away from our hook. Now, just out of habit, I'm working all of my stitches into the back bump, but in this pattern it actually doesn't matter at what point you crochet into the chain row, just because you won't see it in the final project. As you can see, I'm finding it a little bit tricky just because I am using a smaller hook size, so realistically it probably would have been better for me to crochet all of my stitches into the back bump. But as I say, this doesn't affect the pattern, this is completely up to personal preference. But basically our goal here is we want to do 1 double crochet into each stitch up until we have 12 chain stitches left. And once you've reached that point, we're going to change our stitches into half double crochets. So this is going to be what we do to create a slope for our beanie, which will ensure that when we sew it all together, there's not a weird bump at the top, which makes it not only a little bit ugly, but uncomfortable to wear. We're just going to continue with those half double crochets till we have 5 stitches left, and then we're going to switch over to single crochets. So in those final 5 stitches, we want to do 1 single crochet in each stitch. Now in this pattern, I'm going to refer to counting up from the side that has the single crochet. So as we said earlier, it was 12 stitches away from our hook, but obviously you can go ahead and use stitch markers in your project if that's what you like to do. So once you've completed those 5 single crochets, that's going to be your first row done. To start our second row, we're going to turn our work, and what we're going to do is, instead of working our stitches how we normally would, we're going to work into the back loops. So without chaining, I'm going to put my hook in the top of my work and put it underneath just the 1 back loop for pulling up a loop and creating a single crochet. So I'm going to do that 4 more times to create 5 single crochets, and again all of them need to be in that back loop. We're just going to be stacking the same stitches on top of each other, so I'll be doing those 5 single crochets before doing those 7 half double crochets, and just make sure that you're putting 1 stitch into each stitch just to make everything nice and even. Now if you are a beginner, working into these back loops might take a little bit of
practice, but definitely this is a helpful thing to learn. This is a very good way to create ribbing. In this pattern we do this just so the beanie's nice and stretchy and it has that nice ribbed effect. But as I say, we're just going to go ahead and work all of our stitches on top of each other. So I've done those 5 single crochets and I've done those 7 half double crochets. And now it's time for me to start adding my double crochets. Now what we want to do is we want to add 1 double crochet into each stitch. We're just going to work the whole length of the row up until you reach your final double crochet. Then we've got 1 more double crochet to add in that stitch, that chain stitch right at the end. So that chain to skip 3 that we did at the start, that's the chain that we're working into. So once we've worked in the back loop of that, we're going to chain 2, turn our work. And now we're going to do what we've just done, but in the opposite order. So we're going to skip the stitch we just came out of, and in the next stitch, back loop only, we're going to do a double crochet. And we're just going to repeat this all the way down the length of our project. And we're going to do this up until we reach our half double crochets. So as I say, if you want to, you can mark these with a stitch marker. I can kind of just see where these half double crochet starts, or you could even count 12 stitches away from the end of your project. Once you've done that, you're going to do your single crochets, turn your work. And remember, on this side there is no turning chain, we're just going to go straight into those 5 single crochets. Now to finish this step of creating our beanie or fisherman hat, you just want to repeat the steps of doing your single crochets into half double crochets into double crochets, all in the back loop only. Your final double crochet should go into the back loop of the chain 2, or the second chain that you made in that chain 2 before you chain 2 turn your work. Skip the stitch you just came out of and work in the back loop of the next stitch before working down into half double crochets and single crochets. Your panel should now look something like this, where you've got one pinch side, which is going to be where you put all of your single crochets, and then one wide side, which is where there's double crochets and chain 2s. Pinch the start and end of this side to see what the end circumference of your beanie would be like before you decide whether you're ready to finish off your project or not. So in my previous tutorial, I showed you a technique where you can use a row of single crochets to crochet together your beanie. So this would involve going through the 2 loops that you didn't in your chain stitch, and then the back loop of the row that you're kind of actively working on, so the most recent row that you did, and then you'll pull a loop through both of them and single crochet these 2 together. And that would be a good way to attach a beanie if you're not very good with sewing, or even if you don't have a needle, which I didn't when I first started crocheting. But for this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to sew your beanie together. To do this, I'm going to cut my end, and make sure you leave quite a long end. I was definitely not generous enough with this end, but I could make it work, so it doesn't really matter. I would say go for triple the height of what your hat's going to be. So you just want to thread your yarn into a needle, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my needle where I would have put my single crochet. So you want to put your needle underneath the 2 loops that you didn't go through when you worked into your chain row, and then the back loop of the row that you've just worked on, and then you pull that through. Now, I'm not a very good sewer, so you can go ahead and attach the start and end of your project however you would like. However, through my experience, I've discovered that working through the 2 loops that you didn't work into in the chain row and the back loop of the active row that you're just working on creates the best result, just because this helps keep the pattern of ribbing on your good side as we're leaving that front loop out. So this creates a seam that's easier to kind of camouflage into the rest of the stitches. So once you've worked up the length of your row, you just want to make sure that you're happy with how tight your stitches are. So I kind of pull my project around, and then you want to fasten the knot. As you can see, I definitely didn't leave myself a long enough knot, so I had to be quite careful with it, but I definitely made it work and it will be fine. Now, our final step is going to be to sew up the top of this hat. So how I do this is I'll get the longer end of the 2, which for me was the end that I had at the start of my project, and I'm just going to fish my hook through these kind of bumps that are just one strand as is. There should be 2 bumps that are left, one that's kind of looking like a single crochet and one that's just 1 strand of yarn that's just created like this little hole. I fish my hook through every second one of these. Now if you're using a slightly bigger hook size, I would fish your needle through every one, but because this is quite a tight material, I think it spreads out a lot easier going through every second one. You can play around with both of these ideas, but once you're happy with how it looks, you want to pull that yarn tight to gather all the material together. Then simply you just have to create a double knot with your other strand of yarn, and your beanie is done. Remember, the side that we were just working on is our bad side, so you want to flip your beanie inside out, and you can either sew down kind of where you folded up the beanie. I personally don't like doing this, but this is all up to personal preference.
Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. As I say, I get a lot of use out of this pattern, so I hope you guys enjoy. Please like, comment and subscribe. I'm going to leave all my social media links down below if you are interested. Thank you guys again for watching. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I will see you later. Bye.